In Ecuador's remote and unexplored Amazon jungle, local legends preserve the grandeur of an ancient city built by giants. Gigantic structures built from huge blocks of stone are slowly yielding to the ruthless hand of Mother Nature, who is steadfastly reclaiming all that has been taken from her. Despite these claims and legends existing for centuries, official institutions deny the existence of such a place, calling it a figment of fantasy and folklore. But a group of extraordinary adventurers and explorers discover something too strange and utterly fascinating to simply dismiss as a myth. This video will take you in the footsteps of these brave explorers, penetrating the heart of the jungle and uncovering the City of Giants, an ancient place shrouded in centuries of silence and filled with unsolved mysteries. We will seek out the incredible truths that have been suppressed for years. But we must warn you, be prepared. What you will discover may undermine everything you know about human history up to this point. A story full of adventure, mystery, and forbidden knowledge awaits you. A story that has been kept quiet for too long. Myths and legends. In the heart of the Amazon jungle, in the depths of Ecuador, the myths and legends of the local tribes sing the epic of ancient cities built by giants. These gigantic structures, they say, were home to a powerful race that lived there long before the arrival of regular-sized humans. These legends have passed down the centuries, passed down from one generation to the next, through the oral folklore of the many tribes that inhabited the Amazon jungle. They talk about giant pyramids and structures built of massive stones weighing tons, impressive with their grandeur and scale. According to these stories, the cities of the giants were home to thriving civilizations that preceded modern tribes and their ancestors. Some ancient times local tribes have used these places for their ritual gatherings, believing that they are inhabited by powerful spirits and forces. Others dare not approach them for the same reasons. These legends describe giants as majestic creatures exceeding normal human size. The tools they left behind were so huge that an ordinary person could not handle them. These giant tools, along with other archaeological finds, suggest an extremely advanced civilization with deeply developed technology and knowledge that far exceeded that of the contemporary tribes in the region. It is precisely these mystical stories passed down through the centuries that motivate a group of explorers to embark on a long journey through the unexplored jungles of the Amazon jungle in search of the lost city of the giants. The discoveries of the expedition. An expedition conducted in 2012 led by a group of scientific researchers aimed to investigate the claims of the legends of the local tribes. Researchers have discovered a number of megalithic structures in a remote area of the Ecuadorian Amazon jungle, including a large pyramid 80 meters high and 80 meters wide. The structure was built using hundreds of large, irregular-shaped stones, each weighing about 2 tons. At the top of the pyramid is a flat area that may have been used as a ceremonial or sacrificial platform. In addition, the team also came across a set of huge ancient tools scattered throughout the forest. They were so large that it would be almost impossible for a normal-sized person to use them. Researchers suggest that these tools were used for metalworking, but their exact function remains unknown. Additionally, a cement-like substance was also found that was used to bind the large stones together. According to the researchers, this may be the earliest example of the use of concrete in America. The discovery of all these objects suggests that the builders of this ancient city possessed engineering knowledge far more advanced for their time. One of the researchers named Bruce Fenton believes that the tools speak for themselves. What we saw really strongly suggests that this population was of the same race as the giants. We came across extremely large hammers, or at least stone hammer heads. Assuming they were attached to handles made of hard wood, they would have been extremely large and heavy, making their use as tools impractical for a typical Inca or Native American, who are usually quite small people. In addition to the above findings, the team also observed numerous large mounds that have yet to be excavated. Although they are covered in mud and vegetation, their shape suggests that it is very likely that more pyramids are hidden beneath them. French-American archaeologist Benoit Duvernoy described what was seen of the find as follows. It looks like a paved wall, an ancient street, or square at a 60-degree angle, perhaps the roof of a large structure. Many of the stones are perfectly aligned, have sharp edges, and appear to have been sculptured by human hands. Researchers have also come across a number of large stones with circular holes cut right in the middle, which provide further evidence that refutes claims that the large pyramid-like structure may simply be a natural formation. But all accounts, it appears that the find is clearly bigger than everyone first thought. According to the discoverers, there is a strong possibility this find will solve many of the mysteries of South America and lead to the discovery of one of the most sought-after treasures in the world. Some researchers speculate that the structure may be the mausoleum of Atahualpa. Atahualpa, the last Inca emperor, who was captured by the Spanish, is said to have been buried with a huge pile of gold amassed by his followers to pay for his release. The search for the tomb and the riches that rest within is one of the world's most significant historical treasure hunts and has inspired many expeditions. They all seem to have been unsuccessful so far. Bruce Fenton, however, who has extensively researched indigenous cultures in the region, believes that the site is more likely to date from much earlier, that is, from an unknown pre-Inca culture. His conviction came from the 30 tools found at the vicinity and the degree of erosion observed on the large stone blocks. The investigation of the site is extremely difficult due to the dangerous conditions. The nearest town is about 8 hours away through the dense and mountainous jungle, and part of the route to the site is risky, to say the least, as it passes through terrain with the concentration of killer bees, the result of a failed experiment conducted in the 50s of the last century ended with the escape of thousands newly created killer bees and the hundreds of deaths from their stings throughout North and South America. The reaction of official institutions. In response to the discoveries, the Ecuadorian Ministry of Culture sent one of its teams to verify the findings in 2013. Despite the obvious man-made structures and tools, the ministry's official report concluded that the site was a natural formation and not an ancient archaeological site. However, Bruce Fenton, Benoit Duvernoy, and their colleagues disagree. The size and shape of the blocks, the precision and technique with which they were cut, polished, and assembled seem to point to an artificial origin. Researchers are disappointed that the site has not been properly explored. Despite this protest, no further surveys were made at the site. Fenton reports that many of the artifacts had already been stolen by then, making it even more difficult to piece together the full history of the site. According to some sources, the Ecuadorian government was reluctant to investigate further for archaeological finds, although government institutions were willing to dig at the site to look for oil deposits. This controversial position leads to further questions and controversy surrounding the Lost City of Giants. Today, more than a decade after the expedition, there is still no information about further research or new discoveries made at the site. Analysis of the scientific community. The position of the scientific community regarding the so-called Lost City of Giants in Ecuador is highly skeptical. The findings that have been reported by the team of researchers have been the subject of considerable debate, controversy, and discussion. The scientific community often emphasizes the importance of verifiable and reliable evidence in archaeology. This is especially important when it comes to such unusual claims as the existence of ancient civilizations of giants. All findings must undergo rigorous scientific evaluation, taking into account the context of the discovery, potential alternative explanations, and the need for additional evidence. However, nothing was done and the object was once again neglected by the scientific community. So it remains in the hands of the ever more consuming nature and looters trading in ancient artifacts. Appealing fiction, ancient myth, or faded truth on its way through the ages, the story of the ancient city of giants remains yet another unsolved mystery in human history. Sometimes we find a city and have to use myths or legends to figure out the true history. Sometimes we have the myths and go hunting for a place to see if it exists. In the case of the lost city of Iram, it's a relatively unique case of a mixture of both. For over 1,000 years, the rumors of the lost city in the desert have caused people to wonder. Many people wondered how much was true versus how much was myth. There are tantalizing glimpses of the city in mythology and archaeology. We're going to start with what we know. Then we will see what we can tease out of the data to make sense of it. The mythology alone is enough to make you think of spices, sand, and will capture your imagination. The archaeology was full of adventure, difficulties, and danger. Even today, the terrain is daunting, but for many years, it would have been impossible to think of anything like a dig given the lack of water. In Saudi Arabia, nestled in empty quarter, there was a city that is now known by various names such as Iram, Ubar, Wabar, Iram of the Pillars, or even the Atlantis of the Sands. Although the names change, the story remains the same. Much of it remains a mystery, because even today, archaeology in the empty quarter is difficult to say the least. However, let's start by taking a quick look at the empty quarter and then move on to what we know of the city. The empty quarter, or Rub al-Khali. It is the largest sand desert in the world. It spreads out over 650,000 square kilometers over much of Saudi Arabia, Oman, United Arab Emirates, and Yemen, and it is part of the largest Arabian desert. The ever-shifting sands can reach over 250 meters in height. It is the third driest place on the planet, as well with less than 16 millimeters of rain a year. In recent years, satellites have shown us geoglyphs that are 9,000 years old, which are some of the oldest on Earth. As always, these glyphs are a mystery, since no one knows their purpose and since they can only be seen from above. So far, no one has an explanation for what purpose they serve. Are they some kind of attempt to contact aliens? Were they part of an unknown Neolithic religion? Satellites have also shown us a network of low walls throughout the Arabian Peninsula and what they are also in Jordan. What purpose could these serve since they are too short to be related to agriculture? Could they be related to the ancient trade routes? Much like the geoglyphs, it is a mystery. Now onto the city of Iram. The story of Iram traces its origins back to the Quran. In chapter 89, it is stated, "Have you not considered how your Lord dealt with Iram, who had lofty pillars, the likes of whom had never been created in the land?" The story goes that King Shaddad built the city. He was descended from Noah, and unlike his forefather, he grew greedy and corrupt. He forced the prophet Hud to tell him when Allah was dissatisfied. However, he didn't listen, and thus the city was subjected to a sandstorm that lasted 8 days. In Islamic tradition, Iram was filled with massive buildings and pillars which reached the heavens. The city is also associated with idolatry, corruption, and the jinn. Allah decided to destroy the city because it was filled with corruption. Other stories say that the people living there were giants who were descendants from Noah and who had great strength. which brings us to mind the stories of the Watchers and the Nephilim, doesn't it? What also comes to mind is the Tower of Babylon and its destruction, which we discussed in some previous videos, since it implies a city destroyed much like God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. One of the earliest mentions of the city outside of the Quran comes the Islamic scholar and great traveler al-Masadi, who dates from the 10th century. He claimed to have visited Iram and described it as filled with riches. Unfortunately, he didn't go too far as to leave us a map of where to find this city. Although if you want a picture of the world at this time, you could do worse than to read him. For 900 plus years, here's where our story ends. But still, people heard the stories and still imagined the lost city of the sands. Fast forward to the 20th century. Although mentioned in the works of H.P. Lovecraft and also in other books such as Secret Societies by Philip Gardner and Bob Kearns, Lost Lands, Forgotten Realms, Lovecraft portrays the city as a place linked to Cthulhu, which means menacing evil and death. While the book Lost Lands, Forgotten Realms links the city with the Watchers, there are still some people who insist there was something more to the stories of Lovecraft and seem more to the link in the stories that associate this city with corruption. In 1948, a geological team from Petrol Development Limited was exploring the empty quarter and came across a low wall and a cave near Shizr. Although they made a note of the find, yet again they didn't leave us a map. However, what an interesting find. This just fueled more speculation, although it would take slightly more than 20 years for anything concrete to be found. Finally, in 1973, there seemed to be an outside confirmation that the city had existed at one time. Archaeologists in Syria found a huge collection of texts from the ancient city of Elba, which dated from 2500 to 2250 BCE. These tablets seem to confirm there was once a place known as Iram. Suddenly, it didn't seem there was more to it than just legends. However, no one knew where it could possibly be. Then in the 1990s, technology took a leap forward, and in 1992, a discovery identified the location of a city in the empty quarter. Could it be Iram? Located in Amman, near the border of Yemen, it showed a system of irrigation and agriculture. An amateur archaeologist named Nicholas Clapp led an excavation to the site. What did he discover? Here's how the New York Times described the find. Guided by ancient maps and sharp-eyed surveys from space, archaeologists and explorers have discovered a lost city deep in the sands of Arabia, and they are virtually sure it's Ubar, the fabled entrepreneur of the rich frankincense trade thousands of years ago. He discovered a mysterious octagonal fortress with spires. Thus, it didn't quite match what people had expected to find. So, there were still some people who were skeptical. However, it was clear that was a city that was connected to the outside world through the trade routes, so it being rich in spices was a very likely possibility. However, this wasn't quite the degenerate city filled with mystery that people were expecting. The lost city of Iram has sparked the imagination for centuries, and truthfully, any real city would likely have been a disappointment. Currently, opinion still is varied amongst archaeologists. Eventually, maybe, we will know more. So where does this leave us? Although it has been a city of mystery for over 1,000 years, there is still much to be discovered. The mythological religious component is also linked to so many other interesting topics. Why would it be linked to the children of Noah? He was someone who has been speculated was also a Nephilim himself. Now we know that Nephilim have long been linked with corruption, chaos, and forbidden knowledge. So the offspring of Noah may very well have been giants and known how to survive in such an environment. Spices could account for the riches. Satellite imagery shows that it was tied to the trade routes, and we know from the stories they've been passed down about Petra that it could lead to riches. Interesting about those low walls being throughout Arabia and Jordan, which was also linked to the spice trade through Petra. Since those low walls aren't seen elsewhere, it makes one think. Although we can't know for sure, that can't be entirely coincidence, can it? This city, much like Troy, shows how much there is to be found in myths and legends. They aren't all just stories. Sometimes they are best sources of finding the truth. If you like what we do, support us by subscribing to the channel.